Around a little bit here, but as I mentioned last week, the Secretary will be leaving on travel tomorrow morning. First stop is Brussels for the NATO Defense Ministerial. He looks forward to having another discussion to talk with our NATO allies about all the things we're doing as an alliance to bolster and support our deterrence capabilities on the eastern flank. From there, he will go to Slovakia. I think we already talked about that last week. And today, the Secretary has added a third stop on in Bulgaria. So he will extend the trip by a day. We'll have a chance to meet with senior civilian and military leaders in Bulgaria. Also, a key stop in terms of the eastern flank of the alliance. He looks forward to that. We'll obviously have more detail as the trip progresses and certainly keep you informed. On an exercise note, Operation Noble Defender now is a recurring NORAD air defense operation, takes place throughout the year. This winter's Noble Defender, planned for March 16th, will occur during a series of Arctic activities that demonstrate Allied collaboration to defend North America's northern approaches. This iteration of Noble Defender will incorporate several assets from both Canada and the United States, with support from Denmark to allow air defense operations from Thule, Greenland. During this exercise, NORAD fighters will conduct intercepts of U.S. Strategic Command bombers representing threat platforms throughout the Arctic from Alaska to Greenland. And we'll keep you apprised as that exercise progresses. And then just lastly, on behalf of everybody here at the department, we'd like to extend our deepest sympathies to the family of Brent Renaud, a freelance journalist who was tragically killed over the weekend covering Ukraine. We understand that he was working on a documentary about refugees, and clearly this unprovoked war by Mr. Putin has created now more than 2.5 million refugees. So we applaud the work that he was doing, the bravery with which he did it, and again, our deepest condolences and sympathies go out to his family. I would also like to take this opportunity to express our concerns over what we understand now is that the injuries sustained by Mr. Benjamin Hall, a Fox News correspondent, also covering the war in Ukraine. We are given to understand that he's being treated right now in a hospital for his injuries. We certainly wish him all the best, a speedy recovery and a safe return. Again, two examples of the dangers in covering war. This is a war that didn't need to be fought, to be sure. But just as to be sure, there are journalists from around the world on the ground trying to discover the truth and to show that truth and to tell these important stories. And again, our best go out to Mr. Hall, and certainly our deepest thoughts go to his family, as I'm sure they are worried about him and his well-being. But again, we're thinking about him. And with that, we'll start taking questions. Let's see, where's my AP guy? Lita, you're on the phone.
Yep, I'm here. Thanks, John. Can you talk a little bit about the strikes on Yavoriv the other day? Are those strikes making it any more difficult for the U.S. to get security assistance in to the Ukrainians? And does that raise concerns about the war moving closer to the Polish border? Are there any new efforts going on to either supplement troops or other systems, weapons, et cetera, to protect Poland?
Near the Polish border at the Yamaviv.
So again, without getting into too much tactical detail, Jen, I mean, this was clearly a Russian airstrike. Our understanding is that these were cruise missiles fired from aircraft, long range, on the Yavoriv training facility there in western Ukraine. I can assure you that there were no U.S. military personnel there at that training facility. That's where the Florida National Guard had been doing their training before they left a few weeks ago. No U.S. contractors there, no U.S. Civilians, no U.S. government personnel there at all. As for the damage done, we know that several structures were hit. we don't have a perfect picture of what the damage was done or how much gear or equipment was hit and with what effect. But as we've said before, this is now the third significant strike in Western Ukraine. It certainly appears as if the Russians are broadening their target set.
And were NATO weapon shipments going through that location? Is that why it was being targeted?
I can't speak for Russian targeting justification. That's really not always clear to us. But look, we've been very careful about not wanting to talk about the routes through which security assistance is getting to Ukraine, and I don't want to start by doing that today. I would just tell you that we have multiple routes to get security assistance into the hands of the Ukrainians. This was not one of them.
But these Russian planes were in Russian airspace. They didn't cross into Ukraine?
I'd rather not talk about specific air operations for the Russians. We know they were long-range strikes, cruise missiles, but beyond that, I think I'd demur. Yeah, Fadi.
Thank you, John. So just follow up. Is this airstrike on Yavoriv, and I believe there was another town that was targeted as well. Do you have now indications that there are any efforts by the Russians to interfere with security assistance supplies and routes into Ukraine? Is that a concern now? Because so far, senior officials have been telling us that there were no indications of such an effort. Is the strike on the weekend kind of
again? We're not looking at this strike as an effort to go after the delivery of security assistance to Ukraine. I'm not going to talk about all the modalities of how we're continuing to find ways to help Ukraine defend itself. I think you guys can understand that. And all I would tell you in answer to your question, your larger question, is that we're going to continue to get as much security assistance to the Ukrainians as fast as we can and in the most efficient, effective way. And there's lots of different ways that we're pursuing that. And I just don't think it's helpful, certainly not to Ukrainians, for us to be detailing that here from the podium.
But on the efforts by the Russians have you seen any indications that they're trying now to interfere with these security?
All I would tell you is that we continue to have ways to get stuff into the hands of the Ukrainians. And again, I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to talk about Russian targeting and Russian operations. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. To go back to this strike on Yavoriv, do you consider that as a turning point in the war? The fact that they start striking in the West, or do you consider that as just a signal to the West that we can do that if we want?
I don't think we would reduce something like this to calling it a signal. I mean, they use multiple cruise missiles here. Clearly, they had their reasons for targeting that training facility, and it is a Ukrainian military training facility. I'll let them speak to their targeting justifications. As for a turning point, no, Sylvia, I wouldn't think that we would consider this or the other strikes in Western Ukraine as some sort of turning point. The Russians clearly are expanding some of their target sets. That's obvious just from the fact that over the last couple of days we've seen other targets hit in Ukraine. It doesn't change, I think, our general understanding that they continue to be frustrated by a very stiff Ukrainian resistance, and they are not making the kind of progress on the ground that we believe they thought they would be making by this point. Let me try Lita again since we didn't make that work. Lita, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
Okay. I just want to expand a little bit on a couple of the questions. Is it getting difficult more broadly to get security assistance into Ukraine at all? And secondly, as the strike at Yavoriv got the fight closer to the Polish border. Are you hearing anything from Poland about requests for potentially more security assistance to them or more troops? Do you see any more of that, of any more troops, et cetera, going into Europe in the next week or so?
I don't have any additional troop movements to speak to, Lita. As you all know, when we do have something like that to talk about, a muscle movement, we'll do that, but I'm not, I have no troop announcements to talk about today. We are in constant communication with our Ukrainian counterparts about the types of assistance that they need, the defensive assistance that they need. This is an ongoing, iterative conversation that we're having with them. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that this particular set of strikes on that particular military facility has led to some renewed calls for additional or different assistance. This is a conversation that we continue to have with them. You saw that the president approved another $200 million drawdown package over the course of the weekend. I can tell you that experts here at the Pentagon have pen and paper in hand, and they're working out how we would realize that drawdown as quickly as we can. Again, your question about is it more dangerous now? We've never taken for granted any opportunity that we have to continue to assist the Ukrainians with their defense needs. We're not taking anything for granted. And as I've said before, we're going to continue to provide as much as we can, as fast as we can. Yeah, David.
John, you just said the Russians continue to be frustrated, not making any progress on the ground.
Right.
You say that most days. Does that mean that the Ukrainians are fighting the Russians to a standstill, or are the Russians making progress in ways that aren't measured by advances in the front line?
I think we're going to be careful here at the Pentagon in terms of providing a qualitative report card assessment here and putting a name on it, standstill or what have you. What I would tell you, David, is that the Ukrainians continue to fight back very bravely and skillfully. And you've heard me use the word creatively, and I would say that continues to be the case. They are making good use of their own knowledge, their own situational awareness, their skill sets, and certainly they're making good use of the material that they are getting, not just from the United States, but from many other nations as well. And if you just look at the map and you just look at how little progress the Russians have been able to make in the 2+ weeks now that they've been at this, yes, some of that is due to their own stumbles and missteps and logistical problems, but a lot of it is due to the Ukrainian resistance and how adaptive they are proving to be on the field and, frankly, in the street. Travis?
Yeah, in regards to these Russian strikes in western Ukraine and close to the Polish border, as we know, the Russians aren't always particularly precise with their strikes. And I'm just wondering if there has been any change in the status of U.S. forces deployed to the eastern flank. Is there any heightened alert or change of posture or any additional preparations that have been made since we've seen those strikes move farther west?
Without getting into details about force posture, I can tell you that everybody that's serving and bolstering NATO's eastern flank is pretty alert, pretty vigilant, as you might expect. I know of no specific changes that have been made or are planning to be made in the coming days, just based on the fact that this training facility in western Ukraine was hit. Yeah, Avery.
Thanks, John. Two questions. One, when the U.S. publicly states what it will not do, like enforce a no-fly zone or the Polish MiG transfer, does that not harm Ukraine and give Putin carte blanche? And secondly, often you say that Russia does not have air superiority. However, if Russia's flying 200 sorties a day and Ukraine's flying 5 to 10 and can't fly its combat aircraft because Russia has complete SAM coverage, how is that not air superiority for Russia?
I'm not going to get into the data metrics here with you. We still assess that Russia does not have air superiority over Ukraine, and that the Ukrainians are defending their airspace ably. It doesn't mean that it's not contested, Abraham. Of course it is. I mean, you can see that for yourself in some of the video footage that gets put out there. But it's contested because the Ukrainians are finding ways to continue to try to defend their airspace and to preserve their own mobility and maneuver space. I'm sorry, was there another?
Sure. The first question about when DoD publicly states, when U.S. publicly states what it's not going to do, doesn't that harm Ukraine because it gives Putin a carte blanche?
I think if you were to, well, I can't speak for Mr. Putin. I doubt Putin would after making as little progress as he has made in this unprovoked war of his, would be hard pressed to say that that somehow he's being aided by statements that we are making about what we will or we won't do. What I think is important, Abraham, is not just talking about things that we don't believe would be helpful because of the escalatory nature of it, such as a no-fly zone. But let's talk about what actually is happening. And I just talked a little bit about how hard the Ukrainians are fighting for their country. But we too are providing them and continue to do it over the course of the weekend. And now there's a new drawdown package, and we will continue to fill that out and send material to them in concert with their needs after talking to them about what those needs are as fast as we can and as effectively as we can. And it's not just the United States. 14 other nations are doing this. Bilaterally, of course, we're helping coordinate some of that security assistance. But they're making good use of it. So there's a lot being done.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, Kelly.
I was going to ask, just going back to the airstrike in the west, it's believed to be the closest Moscow has come yet to the Polish border. So what are you taking this as? Is this Putin testing the West in any way, and how are we kind of showing our response to that?
Yeah, I think we just need to be, first of all, I don't have granularity on the Russian targeting process. They hit a Ukrainian military training facility. They also hit some airfields in the previous few days in western Ukraine. They are clearly expanding some of their target sets here. I can't get into their heads and to tell you exactly what was behind that target on that day with that many cruise missiles. I don't want to just reduce this to some sort of signaling. If Mr. Putin was trying to signal his displeasure about a strong, united NATO with this war of his, then he's failed because he's getting exactly what he says he doesn't want, a strong, united NATO on his western flank. Just over the last few days, we moved some Patriot batteries from Germany to Poland, and we're going to continue to look at potential repositioning if we need to defend NATO's eastern flank. So I can't speak for Mr. Putin and what messages he's trying to send, sending it with cruise missiles on a training facility. I think that's being generous to him if that's in fact all he did was try to signal. All he has done with that and everything else he's doing in Ukraine. And please, let's not get focused only on a weekend strike on a training facility. Look at the damage and the death he's causing in places like Kyiv and Kharkiv and Mariupol. And people losing their lives and their homes. He clearly has more than a message in mind here. He clearly has the occupation of Ukraine in mind. And he also clearly has diplomatic options available to him that he is obviously not proving willing to take. Now, we have heard talks of talks, and we obviously would love to see them succeed, clearly. But there hasn't been much progress in that regard. So again, I want to be careful here that we're not reducing the kind of damage and death he's causing to some sort of message signaling. I think that's being way too generous to what the Kremlin's trying to do inside Ukraine. Carla Batten.
Hey, John, thanks for doing this. Two quick questions. So Russia's deputy foreign minister actually warned over the weekend that Moscow would start firing on weapons shipments. So I was just to follow up on some of these questions.
without getting into intelligence, have you seen any indications that they are now trying, that they've shifted and are now trying to target weapons shipments? That's question number one. And then number two, on a different topic, because there is an AFRICOM CENTCOM hearing tomorrow. So on Africa, General Stephen Townsend, the head of U.S. Africa Command, has frequently said over 2 years now that they've been commuting to work. And he had told VOA that there were more effective and efficient ways in Somalia to carry out AFRICOM's mission, and that he had provided recommendations to the secretary. So has Secretary Austin made a decision on U.S. troops in Somalia? And can you please tell us what the delay has been? Thank you.
I have no decisions on Somalia force presence to talk to you about, Carla, and if and when we do have decisions, we'll talk about it. You talk about a delay. I know of no delay. When we have something to speak to with force posture there or anywhere else, and we can do it, we will. Again, we're going to continue to flow security assistance to the Ukrainians as fast as we can and as nimbly as we can. All I can tell you is that as we stand here today, those shipments are getting into the hands of the Ukrainians, and we're going to keep looking for ways to make sure that continues. Tony Capaccio. Button there, Tony.
Oh, hey, John. Oh, I didn't know you called me. Sorry. On the drawdown packages and packages going forward of aid to the Ukraine, do those also include potential allied contributions that the Pentagon would reimburse?
So a couple of things there, Tony. First of all, the aid that's going to Ukraine is not a NATO alliance mission. These are sovereign decisions that individual nations are making about ways to assist Ukraine. It's not under the rubric of NATO, and I think that's important. Number two, I know of no reimbursement plan for the kinds of security. These are decisions that individual nations are making to provide security assistance to Ukraine. They need to speak to those in ways in which they're comfortable speaking to them, but it's not done under some reimbursement plan by the United States of America. We're working very hard on our own delivery and shipments of security assistance. And as I said, now we're nearly at the end of the $350 million package that the president signed over a week ago. We've got almost all of that into their hands. The remaining items should be arriving very, very soon. And then we are already at work trying to figure out what the next drawdown package of $200 million is going to look like. Phil Stewart.
Hey, John. So the U.S. has, or the Poland has, Patriot air defenses that I'm assuming could have ranged Yavoriv because it's so close to the border. I'm just wondering, is this now a show that that the U.S. line about not having troops fighting in Ukraine also extends to these air defenses that are on the NATO side? That the air defenses are really just going to kind of protect NATO airspace. I was wondering if you could. Is that what this incident kind of shows as well? That there's not going to be even missiles hitting missiles kind of thing.
Patriot batteries that we have moved into Poland and any other air defenses that we might be contributing to in Poland are purely defensive in nature. Defensive in nature over NATO airspace and NATO territory. I won't speak for Poland and that government, but for our purposes, the military capabilities that we are adding to NATO's eastern flank are designed to protect and defend and deter against attacks on NATO territory. That includes NATO airspace. Jeff Schogel.
Thank you. And I know you don't have perfect visibility over the situation in Ukraine, and you don't have visibility of what's going on in Vladimir Putin's head. But is the Defense Department seeing any indications that the Russians are intentionally targeting journalists in Ukraine?
Jeff, I don't have evidence of that specifically. I certainly can't, in the case of these two individuals, speak to the circumstances surrounding that. So I can't. I don't have any indications that he's deliberately targeting journalists. But again, our admiration for the work that so many journalists are doing there in Ukraine. It's important work, and all of us stand to gain by the context, quite frankly, that these journalists are bringing to light. Okay, last question. I think, yeah, go ahead, Kassim.
On a separate topic, on Iraq, we see that Erbil was under attack yesterday, and then U.S. statement was saying that the U.S. was not the target, apparently, which suggests, actually, you know who was a target. Who was a target in Erbil
I would
strike?
point you to what the IRGC said about who they were targeting. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that. Obviously, IRGC said they were targeting Israeli strategic sites. We know that the Iranian foreign minister now is going to Russia tomorrow. Also, reports just came out from an Iranian affiliated hacker, an Iranian state media actually saying that Iran hacked the Israeli government website. IDF officials are at the Pentagon today. What did you discuss with them? Any concerns that they mentioned to you specifically?
I don't have a readout of any discussions that we would have had with IDF. I'm not actually tracking meetings today with the IDF, so we'll take the question if there's something we can get back to you on. I don't know at what level this is. It certainly isn't at the secretary's level, so you're catching me a little bit unawares. So we'll take the question and we'll see if we can get back to you.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did your defense systems in the airport in Erbil detect the incoming rockets? And then second question, Jake Sullivan yesterday said that they're in consultation with the Iraqi and the Kurdish government to provide them with some sort of defense capacities. Is that something that a conversation that has reached the Pentagon?
We're always in discussion with our partners in the region about defensive capabilities. I don't have anything new to update you on today, and I don't have any tactical information about detection of the threats of the missiles that were fired over the weekend. I just don't have that level of detail. Okay, thanks everybody. I appreciate it.